Good morning, this is Vaughan at westcoatbellpottery.ca in Nova Scotia, Canada. Anyway, so I'm going to throw T-balls today, and I think I've shown this several times before. So I was just approached by a company called Vivo, and they want me to review their potter's wheels. So I think they're going to send me a potter's wheel to review. So that'll be an upcoming video soon. I looked on the web and they look very small. But they're very affordable for students, so I think I'll be reviewing them with that in mind. Okay, this is a tiny ball. This is half a pound of clay, and the rest of them are a third of a pound of clay. So I have about 6 like this, maybe 8, and then I'm going to be moving to really small ones. But I don't need to round off all these little balls of clay. All right. So centering as a beginner, both hands, body wrapped around the wheel really close in, and you apply pressure with the top first and then with the side hand. So the top is to stop it spinning off the wheel, and the side hand is to put it in center. If you're really having trouble coning it up into an ice cream cone, making sure you don't pull it off the wheel by pressing too hard, you can make an ice cream cone, and then you can center it back down, lubricating it constantly. So let go slowly, put some water on, and then put pressure on. If it dries out, you let go slowly, put some water on, and go back to centering, but you always let go slowly, and that's in center. Feel for the little center hole. Don't make a big hole unless you know it's on center. So there should be no wobble. You should feel no, sort of boom, boom, boom as your finger goes down. And then press down, but now it's drying out because I took a little longer to explain that. Put a pile of water in there and go down, but don't go down too far. Leave about half a centimeter to a centimeter of clay at the bottom. I'm not going to open up these far because these have a small foot. And I'm pushing my finger into the corner and then pulling to the center here. That way you can see, if I do it this side, I go right to the corner and then I come back to the center, and that compresses the clay back to the center a little bit after you've stretched it open. Now 2 fingers, not flat, but just a bit up like that, so the clay will hit the first finger and then be raised by that finger into this finger, which will raise it again, and then it goes up higher. The same on the outside, but these fingers are at a slight increase from flat to maybe 20% angle. These ones are much more like 60% angle, and so by doing that you can actually raise the wall dramatically and put more pressure on with the outside fingers. And make sure you follow the moisture to the top, and then it's a good idea to just touch the finger right on the top each time, just to actually compress the clay at the rim. So 2 fingers. Now I didn't raise it up so high that I can't get my fingers back in, so I put those back in, and I do the same again and put more pressure on with the bottom fingers. Press right in deep, and before it dries you start raising to follow that moisture in the clay so it stays lubricated. So about 1 revolution and you should be a higher amount where the water is. So 1 revolution, it dries out, so you're getting up to there before it dries out, and you're getting up to there before it dries out, and so on all the way up. That way you don't have to stop halfway up a pull to get more water. Now that's getting close to the size of what I want the foot to be. So now I'm just going to put my fingers there, hold them there, and use my inside fingers to push out to make a belly. So my inside fingers are making a belly. Depends on if you want it flared out completely. But that's basically a little T-ball. Could do with a bit more refining. So dribble some water right on the rim so it goes in and out. The same again, fingers on the outside stay where they are, and I'm going to raise my inside fingers and make a belly. My outside fingers are just there as a guide so I can feel them, but my inside fingers are the one doing the pressure. So you've got a bit nicer of a belly. Now using your wooden rib, playing hide and seek with me on the wheel, make a little foot angle there so that you can actually get the wire underneath. You can turn these wooden ribs over and you can put them in there at an angle and press hard with the wooden rib and give yourself a dramatic foot right at the bottom there. See that? That's really pretty. Now, this rib has been modified because when they sell it, it comes much more of a right angle here and curving down. So I sand off this whole area here to actually make a nicer curve, so I can get this a lot more shaping out of this rib than I think the other one. The other ones, when they sell it to you, it's just too big. So I simply cut off the right angle part here and make it more rounded. Now put some water on the inside, and using this metal rib, just basically drag the water off. Got a nice bit of slip there. You can do that a couple of times, but you can also hold it at the bottom under there and kind of give yourself a flat side at the bottom there, just a flat edge that's about 1.5 centimeters wide at the bottom down there. And that's like, I don't know why, but I've always liked that at the bottom. Now I don't need a sponge on a stick for these, but I've got one in the water, so I may as well just suck the water out with this. Make sure you remember to always take the water out. And that is basically a T-ball. There are many shapes you can make different to this. Let me just lift that so you can see it a bit. All right, so there are many variations on this that you can do. So I'm going to throw 48 of these, and then I'll do things with them, I guess. And so I may show you several, or I may just fast forward. I haven't decided yet. But anyway, on this one, let's just say I want to play around a little bit, because it's not off center at all. It's in a nice kind of format. I've shown this before, but you can actually, if you get it going slow, you can kind of go whoop, 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 and give yourself a little interesting to catch the glaze. That also disturbs the rib a little bit, or the rim a little bit, so it's nice just to put your fingers with all the rib back on the center, on the actual edge there. I don't see, I was looking for my tool with the leather on it, but anyway, that's a finished T-ball. To get it off, throw some water out there. Just turn the wheel slowly, and it will come right off. Make sure you got this so you can push it right onto your fingertips. And there's a nice little T-ball. So let's do a couple more. Okay, let's get one of the small pieces of clay. This is a third of a pound. Sometimes when I'm throwing, I throw a heavier piece of clay and I get something that's the same size as a smaller piece of clay. So as you're throwing and your fingers get used to the shape you're trying to make, you might be able to make them thinner and thinner each time as well. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing, because if it breaks too easily for the customer, they'll come back and complain to you. And there's a lot of times where you feel like, you know, if a piece is brought back to you, is it your fault? Or is it just mishandling of the piece later on after the customer's got it? But that becomes an argument if you're pushing it too hard. So most of the time I will look carefully, make a quick decision, and if I know it was just broken, then I'll tell the customer it's been hit. And it may not be by them, they may be completely innocent. It may have been used by somebody in their household who didn't tell them they broke it. But still, you try to, if it doesn't happen very much, it might be better to just make the customer happy and give them a piece, or give them a reduced price on another piece. My goal is to make every customer who comes in my shop happy when they walk out of there. See how you can actually just do these pulls, and each time you get the base a bit smaller, and then you pull out, and then you release on the inside pressure and push with the outside fingers to narrow it a bit. And then when you feel like you've got the height enough, you give yourself a little foot, make sure it's lubricated, put the rib in like that, and then push against the rib, and you can belly it a bit more, and the rib is holding. You can also use this to actually do that little flat area at the bottom to give you that shape there, but it doesn't do good, that rib, to drag water off, so I'll move to the flat sharp metal rib to drag the water off. And then take a look. I've never put a mirror opposite where I'm throwing because I just kind of feel like it's good for my back to be stretched and bent over and reach down with my head to look from the side, because it stretches your back a little bit so you're not rigid in the same position while you're throwing. I'm 67 years old and my back is in good shape. I've had problems with it in the past, but it's always got better. There we go. This is 516 clay as well from the pottery supply house. You can just dribble water as the wheel rotates if you want, or just throw it in from the side, and then just use your wire carefully and pull it off the wheel. I didn't do any fancy stuff on the edges of that one, but I can try it on some others. Okay, we'll go back to the ½ pound one. You know what I was saying about the sizing? A third of a pound and a ½ a pound, there's hardly any difference there. So centering again, move it up and down, and then side pressure to move it up and top pressure to go down. Moving it around a little bit kind of helps, I think, in the centering process. And when you feel like it's doing good, it's in center, you let go slowly. Take a look at my fingers. That's where the clay pressure on the side is. All that little finger, a little bit of that finger, but a big curve. So all of that was touching the clay. And on this hand, it's all a little bit, just on the top area really there. And all that. So that'll give you an idea. Cover the piece up basically. Now feel for the center. When you feel like it's in center, you go down. You're feeling for the center. I think it's this point right here that's touching the center point of the pot, and that's what you've got to feel for. But anyway, you fill it full of water, go down, pull out. It's a small piece, you don't need to go back and get some more water really. If it seems like it was drying, it's probably because you're doing that motion too slowly. And then I basically pulled the clay from the outer edge to the center and built up a little bump, and then pressed it in. And that compresses that area. Now outside, fingers pressure hard, come up fast so that you don't create a dry spot. When you get to the top, you put your finger down to actually make sure it's compressing the rim. Same again, in hard, come up. This little plastic bat is actually, I think it's a plastic bat, this one. You can hear it lifting off the pins and as it rotates a bit. That's because of the pull upwards. So dribble water down both sides. In hard at that point there to make the rim that's a little smaller. This one you press out on the inside and basically come up. See how much bigger this one's getting? Because I made it thinner. Give myself that, and then Just going to give myself a foot here by doing that. Then I'm going to put the rib and push against the rib to give myself that flat area at the bottom, which I might do a little carving in there later on. Then I get the water that's on the rim itself to drag the water off the outer edge. Yeah, this one is a lot bigger. But you can see there was a bit of a wobble starting, and that's because I was taking it very thin. If you're a beginner, you won't be able to throw that thin. So you will end up carving and trimming to lighten your pieces, because you don't have to trim them. Let's go make that a bit flatter down the bottom there. I don't like the curve either there, so I'm going to push out a bit more. That made the curve a little nicer. And that's a much bigger piece. So I'm just going to put 48 of these together. And we'll think about stuff you can do to the outside of them. So I showed you this a few minutes ago, coming up and up and up like that as it was going around. There's nothing to stop you going a little, follow and just let the curve of the wheel, sorry, the rotation of the wheel kind of start, get a speed, let's see, take your foot off the foot pedal and go. So there will be at a slight curve. Got to have a little bit of guts to do that, but it'll go back into center if you do that. You can even define that edge at the top. Let's get that piece of clay off the rib, because the tool might have caught the rib a couple of times, and do that. So it gives you that line to stop these marks if they went too high. And then water underneath. If you're scared of turning the wheel on, just slice through the pot like that and it will still release. Well, we think. Bit of water there. It's just a bit more likely that it won't release, I guess I should say then. But anyway, there's another T-ball. And you can see the last one I did was much bigger. Okay, it's 4:40 in the afternoon, and I spent a large part of the day throwing T-balls. As you can see, there's, I don't know, there's 50, 60 maybe. I lost a couple from the clay just splitting after I sat them on the shelf, because I've been throwing them pretty thin, and this clay body, you have to compress really hard, otherwise you'll see a split just come right down the side wall. But anyway, so I think I'll count, but 50 there I would think, maybe just over. But anyway, I'm going to throw some balls now, so I'll let you watch that, and I'll give you a few tips on those too. These have to dry until tomorrow. Okay, I'm going to do something now that is a request from a subscriber. They've been making the fish that I was doing, but they wanted to know why theirs keep cracking. And this is one of the reasons they can be cracked. And even if you don't see it cracking now, it might crack in the firing later on. Because sometimes you get that noise in the piece and you think, and you know it's going to be a crack. And it's just poor handling. So I'm going to show you how I turn my fish over, well, not really over, but just take away the paper that's underneath them without cracking them. It's tricky, and it's nice if you've got a friend to help you do this, right? Take it right to the edge, and then remove whatever I can. Nothing else. Don't pull tight because that will crack it. But I take it and I tip it until the board is actually loose like that, and then I balance it very carefully. Put the board down, and then I carefully, gently remove all of the bits of paper while I'm balancing this on my hand. And I make sure I'm not holding a fin or something. If it's a fish, this is a whale, but because you don't want to crack one of the fins off either. But you can release the paper very easily. And then very carefully, while it's still balancing, this is why it's nice if you have a friend that can hold the top of it while you're doing this. You place the board back and don't let it click down fast. You're just going to gently let it go back down and tip it back flat. And then you would slide it by having another kiln shelf here. You would slide it onto the kiln shelf, making sure they're level as you're sliding. So you'd have to, if your kiln shelves are thicker, you'll have to put this onto a little thin board but it must be totally level, and you just slide them on the kiln shelf. So you never have to pick it up, because it's so easy to break something off these when they're actually, at this stage. This is bone dry now. So I don't try doing this when it's even leather hard. I let it get bone dry before I do it. And that's it. Now here's a tricky one, because I got two on one back. So I can't slip it, because they'll both fall. So what I do now is very carefully, I slide it to the halfway point, look to see if there's anything fragile in that area, peel off the paper downwards, and then when I think it's balanced at the midpoint where the weight is equal both sides, I tip it, and then I hold it by the top and peel that off, place it back down, so it's going along the actual straight edge of the board, and then rotate it back. But you have to do this so that it is totally balanced and no sudden movements. The fin is the back tail of this is so fragile, so I'm peeling down as I go, looking for the edge of the board. The paper's released all the part down, it's over the board now. So then I tip it slowly, take the top of the piece, don't pull the paper hard because it literally would crack the clay even pulling the paper. Take it back so it's equally on the edge of the board all the way across, rotate it back, and push it back on. And then they're ready to slide onto the kiln shelf. Here's another really tricky one. Got a curve to it, so how is that going to be? So let's see how we go. You take it to the edge, release the paper over your close edge here, and now I've got to try and do this so it's balanced. So I'm going to take it over the edge, where the tail's over the edge, so when it bends down I'm not going to put the weight on that tail. Lift it, hold it by the central point, gently pull the paper away. It's sticking, so I don't want to pull too hard, so I want to persuade it to loose. I don't want to drag it quickly. Try and take the paper off without it. Actually, a girl called Paula just told me a lot of times when you're doing something with clay, you have to do it without the clay knowing you're doing it. Isn't that nice? That's a good thing, Paula. Well done. Paula's from Boston, Massachusetts. So I'm trying to get that so it's balanced without any weight on the tail. So it's very important you concentrate and you actually look before you make any movement of what it's going to do, what that movement will have an effect on. Alright, make sure it's rounded off. This is a slightly bigger than a T-ball. These weigh about 2.5. I'm getting 8 from 22 pounds, so I would say 2.5 pounds. So My elbow is wedged into the wall here, so it gives me a little extra solid kind of anchor for my arm to stop it wobbling. I think that helps because our elbows, wrists, back are really important for potters. And over the years I've had shoulder issues, so by doing this it actually helps on, especially on my left shoulder here. And with this arm I try to put my body right over the right hand side of my body, over the ball, so I can exert more pressure on it too without putting stress on the actual shoulder muscle or joint. It's almost centered. You say that's as close as I need to get it. Find the center, feel for it, and then put a little dimple in, get some water to fill it in, and then go forcefully down and leave about a centimeter at the bottom. Pull your fingers if it doesn't dry out. It's now starting to dry, so I'm going to let go slowly and get some water. It's the outside that was drying. And continue that pull out. I don't want to go too far. Yeah, it's good to leave a slightly thicker base so that you can trim a foot into that area. And then fingers are going to, two fingers like that are going to be positioned at that angle, so we're saying not flat like that, but at an angle of 45, like the T-balls basically. And then the outside fingers do the same, and then you push pressure on the outside and come up as fast as you can to kind of keep with the moist area, so you don't let it dry out under your fingers. Wet on the rim so it goes inside and outside. Same thing again. Forceful pressure on the outside fingers, and the inside fingers put pressure back. And just one rotation means you should be the next layer higher, so you stay on the wet spot. Finger on the top just to kind of put some pressure back on there. Once again, water right on the rim so it dribbles inside and outside. Pressure, forceful. Grab the thick part of the clay at the bottom. And you're lifting that, because if your fingers are 45 degrees, you're lifting that lump of clay from the bottom all the way to the top. There you go. So now pushing the rim back down to level it a little bit. Grab a sponge. I have 3 different sizes of sponge in this wheel. One to grab lots of water, or one to do a little bit of smoothing, which is just small. It's actually half a sponge. But I'm just going to drag that water, and now I'm going to drag the sponge all the way up from the bottom to the top to try and make sure there's no dry or wet spot, where it's sort of even. You can even grab some water out of the wheel and run all the way back down, because you don't want to have lots of water in there, but you want to make sure it's equally lubricated all the way up. And then using the metal rib, my fingers can now glide on that lubrication on the inside. I'm pushing against the rib all the way up. So I dragged water off the outside, and it's really nicely lubricated on the inside. I took all that lot off. That keeps it softening if you leave it on the pot, and I'm going to do the same again. Rib is basically right at the bottom. It's actually touching the wheel, the head itself, the plastibat. But I'm basically pulling all the moisture off the outside, and the lubrication on the inside allows me to push down hard to stretch the ball out wider. And that's a nice open bowl. Then I'm going to take the other curve of the rib and just, my fingers are not going to touch on the outside because it's very dry there now. They're just, well, they are going to touch, but just glide over the surface. I'm pushing on the inside rib on the inside of the bowl. To kind of give myself a slightly wider bowl. Just got a little bit off there. That was the lubrication I put in there with the sponge. But by doing that sponge trick from the top to the bottom, you make sure you've got some thin layer of water, just enough to lubricate. And then you open the bowl up as far as you want. And because this is new clay, that air bubble shouldn't be there. But if you find you've just done a really nice, beautiful bowl, and you've got an air bubble just here, just open up the air bubble, and then using not a wet finger, just to sort of slightly lubricate it, you just kind of do a circle around the hole and gradually pull to the center, and you just got rid of that piece of air. And then you can go back in with the rib. And just kind of flare that rim out just a touch. There's like, I can still see a little bit, but there's nothing much in there now, I would say. Probably that's where the gap was, where there was air, and I've just pushed it. I can keep doing that and then get rid of that little hollow area where the hole was. There you go. So you can see it's pretty much totally gone there now. And then the last thing you do, it's very thin, and this is porcelain clay, so I do not have to worry about, and I had my finger dragging on the out as I was throwing each time. I compressed the rim just enough to totally, but I'm going to just drag that sponge there just to get any moisture and round it off just a touch. But this bowl is very thin, and depending on what you liked on the center of your bowl, put your finger right there and just pull out at the right speed that you want to get a spiral. Just adds a little interest when you're doing your bowl. You may not have customers may not like that because you know, when you're using a spoon on the inside of your bowl, maybe you can't get the last bit of liquid out of that bowl because it's in that little hollow bit. Let's get rid of that Mark II that was from the rib. That's gone now. So that's the bowl. This is Paula, who just stopped by, and she's from Massachusetts, one of our subscribers, and she teaches 12-year-olds at, I guess that's middle school. And it was very nice to see you, Paula, and I'm glad you could make it up into Nova Scotia and enjoy some of the beautiful weather that we've been having. So thanks for coming by, and we will talk to you next time. And also thanks for buying all those pieces. Right, bye bye.